I had done a similar session in October 2020, almost 18 months ago, and I'm super excited to do this again with a new set of tips. None of the tips are a repeat from the last session, so even if you attended that, you would want to attend this one as well. These tips are slightly more advanced than the ones I shared last time, so hopefully you will find all of them useful. Before we get started, just a little bit about myself. My name is Hardit Bhatia. I'm a Power Platform architect at Hitachi Solutions. I'm a business applications MVP. Here is some of my social media details, profiles, and I have this at the end of the session as well. Feel free to connect with me. Any questions related to Power Apps, I'm always available irrespective of time zones. So definitely reach out to me if you have any questions. And just a fun fact, this presentation that I have is not PowerPoint, it's actually a Power App. So if anybody wants to use this, I will be happy to share it after the session. Agenda, there is no agenda. 26 alphabets, one after another. That's what we will do today. So the first one is A, and it's about accordion galleries. There are a couple of ways to do it. One involves using a nested galleries, and I'm going to go out of the preview mode so you can actually see. This one is the gallery on the left. As you can see, it is a nested gallery. There is one more way in which you can actually achieve the same behavior using a single gallery. Without going into a lot of details, the tip is to structure your collections in a way that it will support using just one gallery. Data model here in my example is pretty simple. There is a checklist table that I'm going to show here. So there is a checklist table which has multiple sections, and each section has multiple questions. Sections have a sequence number and so do questions. This is so that they can be ordered in a specific way. In the nested gallery approach, the collections is formed using the sections. The gallery inside is populated with questions related to a specific section. Whereas in the single gallery approach, the collection is directly of questions. There are labels for section headers, and they are visible only for questions with sequence 1. So I'm going to give a quick preview. I'm going to load the data into collections. As you can see, they look pretty much the same. If you expand the section, you can see the questions similarly here. So exactly the same behavior. The left one uses nested galleries, the right one uses a single gallery. And if you want to get the details of this particular tip, I've actually blogged about 3 different ways you can create a checklist gallery. So all the details are included there. Moving on to the next one, this is pretty important, batch updates. Whenever you want to update a bunch of records, you can do a patch inside a for all. That's the instinctive way to do it. That's how I've been doing for a pretty long time. However, that is not performant. When you have a patch inside a for all, it updates one single record at a time. So if you have 50 records in that collection, it's going to loop through all 50 of them one at a time. The alternative is to reshape your collection in such a way that you can actually just do a single patch. And a lot of makers don't know that patch has a syntax in which you can just say patch, table, comma, collection. The collection just needs to have the same structure, the same columns as the table itself. The advantage of that is all the updates happen in a single transaction. So we may or may not able to see the difference. I think we will. I don't have a lot of records, but the one on the left is going to do a patch inside a for all. So I'm going to load the data. And I'm going to do a for all and patch. You can see the button remains disabled for a pretty long time because it's looping through every single record one at a time. And once that happens, you can see this will change. I think that's what I'm trying to update the phone number. Now I'm going to do batch updates with the syntax patch, table, comma, collection. And you can see all of them get updated at the same time pretty quickly. And just to reiterate the syntax, here it is for all collection of accounts, patch accounts, this record, that is the record that you're looping through, update the other phone column to 5678. And this one literally just does this: patch accounts, call account updates. How do I get this call account updates? I still use a for all patch, but I do that on a collection to reshape my collection to match the table structure of accounts. This is not going to take a lot of time because there is no external data call, which is why that allows me to do this patch, and it's pretty quick. Moving on to the next one, custom pages. Custom pages are pretty cool. I call them canvas pages because they are literally canvas apps. These bring the ability to merge canvas apps with model-driven apps. A perfect example of a custom page is if you create a view for contacts in a model-driven app. Sure, you can add whatever columns you want to add, but you cannot display the image of each contact in a model-driven view. What you can do, though, you can create a custom page, create a gallery of contacts, and in a gallery, you can obviously add an image control, and you can that way display the image of contacts. That way, your list of contacts becomes more user-friendly because you can even see the image of the contact that you're looking at. So multiple use cases, multiple advantages of using custom pages. One thing about custom pages is when you start creating one, as you can see, there is no way to add a new screen. You can add controls, you can do a lot of other things, but you cannot add more screens. While that may be good enough for certain use cases, in a lot of them, you will need to have additional screens. So how do you go about that? You actually go to settings, you go to display, and you turn off and turn on enable multiple screens. As soon as you do that, this option shows up, and this will allow you to add multiple screens, even allows you to access different layouts and different scenarios, just like in a normal Canvas app. So if you are creating a custom page and you want to add multiple screens, just go to settings and go to display, go to the last setting, enable multiple screens. Going to the next one, D for dates. Very common use case is to display dates in an app. A lot of makers use the text function like here to format the dates according to the format they want to use. The problem with this, it will give you the result that you want, but you will have to use a lot of placeholders to get to a specific format. The good thing about, or the alternative, is to use some standard enumerations that are available. So you can just say text now date time format dot long date if you want this particular format. There are multiple ones that are available. You can do short date. You can do short date time. You can do long date time. So if you want to format your dates, don't try to come up with the pattern or the date format using placeholders like the one on the left. Just use one of the enumerations that are available to you. This one is actually pretty interesting. I've been creating Canvas apps for more than, I would say, since 2019. And I didn't know about this feature until a few weeks ago. And I have no idea why these controls aren't that famous. There are a couple of controls called export and import. What they allow you to do is they allow you to export data from one app into a file. You can then import that file into the same app or a different app. Now you would think, why is that important? Yes, you can make your app offline capable using save data, load data. But the problem with that is the data is stored in local cache. So if you clear your mobile device's cache, you can lose all your data. This allows you to save the data in a file which users can import when they go online. So I'm going to create a simple collection. I'm going to click on export data, downloads a zip file. I'm going to do import, and I'm going to get this guy here, and it reloads that collection. Keep in mind, though, this is not encrypted, so you don't want to store or download or export passwords. F is for all. For all seems to be the theme of the day. In a for all with nested expressions, let's say there is a filter inside collect inside a for all, especially if the table has a lookup column. Accessing tables and columns can become problematic, leading to errors. So this is a very simple for all expression. Here I have a collection of departments. I'm trying to get all the instructors that belong to all the departments that exist in this collection. So this seems logically correct. For all, call departments, collect, call instructors, filter the instructors table where department dot department, and department is the name of the lookup column. Department is also the name of the GUID column on the department table, is equal to this record dot department again. Too many departments, very confusing, not just for us, even for Power Apps. The way to get past this, one of the ways to get past this is to use the disambiguation operator. Same collection of departments, looping through that same collection, collect, call instructors. Using this, I'm telling this piece of code that instructors is the table that I'm accessing. And if you go back to the one with errors, it is not able to realize, it thinks it's a column. So it says specified column not accessible in this context. By using the disambiguation operator, I'm actually telling it that it's the table I want to access, where department.department is equal to call departments at the rate, again, the disambiguation operator and the department column. So I can literally type this as department as well. This tells it that this particular, the one on the right, the department on the right side of the equals operator is the column of the record in call departments that I'm looping through. So there are a couple of ways, a couple of alternatives to get the same behavior. I have blogged about it. So definitely check out my blog on this topic. It shares 3 different ways you can get past the error that you will get for sure when you're looping through using a for all function and you have nested functions inside it. Next is G. G is for geofencing. So a lot of use cases happen in a lot of apps where you want to find out, let's say, a list of contacts around a given place. Like I want all contacts in Philadelphia. Of course, if you have city, that's the way you would do it. Let's say you are dealing with lat longs and you want to focus on a specific county as an example. Typically, geofencing works when you draw a circle with a certain radius. This tip is not going to give you that same circle. It actually draws a square around a point. So it's not completely accurate, but good enough in most use cases. Yes, there is a way to calculate geofencing using a circle. That just becomes too complicated. So in this case, the approach is actually pretty simple. You define a certain, you get the user's current location. If you want certain contacts around a certain point where the user is right now, then you add or subtract a predefined or configurable range to define the boundaries. So imagine you have a point, you want to create a square. So you take a point, you subtract certain values to get the lower end of latitude and longitude. You add certain that same range to get the higher end of the latitude and longitude. Then you just filter the list of contacts this way, where filter call address, which is basically a collection of addresses where latitude is greater than the lower end, less than the higher end or upper end. Similarly, the longitude is greater than the lower end and less than the upper end. I am not sure if I have the correct data here, so I may not find anything, but that's the approach you can take to find certain records within a given geofencing region. Going back to one of the tips that I'd done last time, I had compared data table with galleries. One of the differences or advantages of data tables is that it actually adds a horizontal scroll bar automatically if you have more columns that can fit in the screen. You can actually do that now with galleries as well with the help of the new layout containers. To do that, all you need to do is add a vertical container. And before I tell you the next steps, I just want to show you a data table. If you add more columns, just simply adds this horizontal scroll bar. Galleries don't do that out of the box, but you can actually add. And I personally prefer galleries over data tables because things like this image column are not possible in a data table. So I always prefer galleries, and the lack of horizontal scroll bar was the only time when I used to use data tables. So to get this, you add one of the new layout containers, vertical one, add a gallery inside it, set the minimum width of the gallery based on the rightmost control. In this case, that is this note control that I'm using to define the minimum width of the gallery. And then the only other setting you need to do is you need to set, let me show you the container. You need to set the horizontal overflow property to scroll. As soon as you do that, it's going to give you the horizontal scroll bar. Going to the next one, I for international. There are a lot of times when you want to create multilingual apps. The approach that we used for the Dataverse for Teams apps that we created, all the sample apps that you see like inspection, milestones, Profile Plus, those were all created by uh, our team at Hitachi Solutions. And the approach we took was we loaded all the translations in an Excel. And the layout of that Excel was there were basically three columns. One to denote which language code is this particular row for. Another column for a unique ID for a given piece of text. Third column for the translated text. So if you were translating a language or translating an app in 5 different languages, for every piece of text, there would be 5 rows in that Excel. Then all we were doing is, and I'm going to show you that here in the on change property, we were first capturing the user's current language using the language function. Here I'm using a combo box so I can easily show you without changing the language of my browser. And once you've captured user's language, I will filter the table of localizations, which I get from a static Excel. So if I go to data sources, there is a table, Excel table here called table localizations. It's here somewhere, right here. I first load that. I filter that based on the language of the current user. And once I have that in the collection, then all I need to do is go to any label with text that you want to translate and do something as simple as that. Look up that collection of localizations, right? So like I said, if you are doing it for 5 languages, there will be 5 rows. I only have one piece of text just for display purposes or demo purposes. And all I'm doing here is doing a lookup on this collection where text ID, and this is up to you. You can give whatever text ID you want to give. I always just use the label or the control name. You can even add a property because for some controls, it might be text. For some controls, it might be hint text. So whatever nomenclature you want to follow, you can do that. And language ID is equal to the user's language, and give me the text property from that collection, which is the translated text. So if I now say US, it's hello. If I go to Japanese, it is hello in Japanese. If I go to French, it's bonjour. Hindi, it's namaste. And Spanish, it's hola. So using this simple approach, you can translate or localize your app. And the good thing about this approach is there are no external calls to fetch the translations. It's all local within the app, so there is no impact to performance. Is JSON. Calling a flow using the JSON function works better than not using it because it helps to reduce the number of times you need to refresh the flow connected to a Power App, which is often necessary when changing input parameters. So here is an example. Say if you delete the last name and then added back, the sequence of parameter gets changed, which will again need a change to make sure the values get passed correctly. Whereas if you use the JSON function, you won't have to go through those extra steps. Next is K. This is for kiosk mode. I didn't know about this until a few weeks ago. iPads, and this is actually something I learned from the community forum. So if you are getting started with Power Apps and you have questions that you want answers to, definitely suggest going to the Power Apps forums, because 9 out of 10 times, whatever issue you are facing, someone else has already faced that. And even if your question is not already answered, just post your question. You will, in most likelihood, get responses in less than 24 hours from people all over the world. And you might even get multiple answers, multiple correct answers to your question. So that's literally what I did when I started off with Power Apps. I actually just asked one question, but then when I looked at the answers, it was a beautiful experience. And I thought, instead of asking, just outrightly going and asking questions, I'm actually going to look at questions that people have already asked that are unanswered, and I'm going to try solving them so that I can learn along the way, and also help people getting the answers that they are not able to. So if you want to do that, I would say that's a good approach as well. Worked for me for sure. Go to forums, go to the Power Apps forums, pick an unanswered question, try it out in your own environment. And if you do get the answer, definitely post it back. And there are actually a lot of good perks of becoming a super user, which you do when you've reached or collected a certain number of points. And I am not being paid by the Power Apps forums team to do its propaganda. I just really feel that it's actually a very useful resource. So, like I said, definitely go out there and try it out. So, back to the tip with K. iPads have a kiosk mode, which is ideal when you're using an app for, say, an event registration, and the iPad is kept at the entrance. To enable the kiosk mode, you need to go to settings, and I have a recorded video here. You go to settings, accessibility, then you turn the guided process on. Once you do that, you then open the app you want to restrict the iPad to. So I'm going to get to my app. Then you press the home button 3 times, then draw a circle on the left border, because if you don't do that, users will be able to swipe from left to right and get to the list of all the apps that you have in your current environment, which you definitely don't want to do that. So don't forget to do that so users cannot slide out to get the entire list of apps. Cool. Moving on to L, lookups and filters. Lookups inside of filters, especially if you're using Dataverse, can get pretty tricky, especially if the lookup column name on table A is the same as the name of table B, which in turn has the GUID column with the same name. Kind of sort of going back to the example that we looked at, where we were doing a for all on departments to collect all instructors, there was this pattern which was department dot department equal to this record dot department, right? So to filter courses based on an instructor, there will be 3 references to instructors. So here, I'm going to go here, go to this combo box, and this is basically displaying the list of instructors. Now, to filter courses based on instructor, like I said, there will be 3 references. Instructors is the table name. First instructor on the left-hand side of the equation is the lookup column on the courses table. Second instructor on the left side after the dot operator is the GUID column. And then the instructor on the right-hand side is the GUID of the selected instructor. So 3 different references to instructor. Do not get confused. And one quick tip here, if you don't want to get into this mess where the same name is repeated 3 times, on the department or on the related table, like the courses table here in this example, when you are creating a lookup column to the instructor table, don't name your lookup field as instructor. So call it something like instructor or responsible instructor, lead instructor, whatever you want to call it other than instructor. That way you will reduce the number of references to the same word from 3 to 2, and it will get less confusing. Next is M, model driven apps. This I know is more about Canvas apps, but this is a quick tip. You can create Canvas apps in Dataverse for Teams, but you cannot create model-driven apps. And now that model-driven apps and Canvas apps are merging with each other, especially because of custom pages, it's becoming more and more important to have similar features across the two different types of apps. Since you can add Canvas apps to Teams, you increase the accessibility, you make it easier for people to access apps because people use Teams a lot. So if your app is not inside Teams, and it doesn't even have to be Dataverse for Teams apps, you can add any Canvas app to Teams. And because of that, people can get to those apps pretty quickly. But that privilege was only for Canvas apps until now. You can now add a model-driven app to Teams, which is awesome because like with Canvas apps, if you add an app to Teams, it becomes more easily accessible. I think I have a video of that. I'm going to play that here. Just like how you would add a Canvas app, you would click on the plus sign inside a team channel, search for the app. There is now a filter for model-driven apps. Pick the one that you want to add, click save. It will post a notification in the channel if you have selected that checkbox. And you can get to this beautiful view now where you have a model-driven app inside Teams. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of times now in my recent projects, I've used a model-driven app as a container for the multiple different Canvas apps I have. Another advantage of using custom pages, which is you can bring all your Canvas apps within one shell or container, which is a model-driven app, and that model-driven app can be added inside Teams for users to access not just the model-driven app, but all the custom pages, which are technically Canvas apps that are loaded inside a model-driven app. So pretty powerful feature that got added recently. Going on to the next one, which is N for navigation. This is specific to Android phones. So a lot of times what happens in Canvas apps is either at the top of the screen or at the bottom, you provide buttons or icons for users to navigate between screens. In some apps, that is a good feature. In some apps, it's not the best user experience. So depending on what the UI and the layout of your apps is, that adding an icon or a button may not be the best option. Now with this new app setting, it actually enables you to use your Android phone's back button. That easily removes the need for adding a back icon on all your screens. So if I go here, if you go to settings underneath experimental, there is this setting called Android back button. It says allow end users to navigate back in your app using the Android system back button. If you turn it on, this is how it will behave. So I don't know if you can see, let me see if I can expand it and play it again. What it does is whenever I touch the screen, it creates a little bubble. So focus on the bottom part here. I will click on this arrow, which is the back button of my Android device to navigate back between screens. So next time you need the ability to navigate between screens, which is probably in every single app. And if the target audience is using Android devices, try it out, try this feature out, or try this app setting to make use of the native back button of the Android devices. Moving on to the next one, offline capabilities. Give me just 1 second. Sorry for the disturbance. We are back. So offline capabilities in model-driven apps. We all know how awesome and cumbersome it is to add offline capabilities to Canvas apps. However, it's actually pretty easy to do that for a model-driven app. And as you can see, I have included a couple of model-driven app tips here. The reason for that is custom pages, which now can be added to model-driven apps, and that merges the two different apps, like I've said before. And I am highlighting that multiple times because I believe that is the future of Power Apps, where you will use custom pages inside model-driven apps a lot more than, let's say, embedded Canvas apps, which until now has been the way to merge Canvas apps and model-driven apps. So to add offline capabilities to your model-driven app, you can follow the steps that I've outlined here. I'm going to turn this on as well. So these are the steps you can follow to get this behavior that I'm showing on the right-hand side. Right now, the app is connected. I'm going to download all the updates, which is basically download all the tables that I've configured for offline capabilities. I'm going to turn on airplane mode, go to offline mode, and it says you are now working in offline mode, but I can still access the entire list of accounts and contacts and open an account and go inside it. So adding offline capabilities to model-driven app is actually pretty simple. These are the only steps you need to follow. Next is P for pen input. This is a fun one because typically it's actually easy to check if a control is blank or not. However, that is not the case with the pen input control. So the approach is slightly convoluted, but it actually works. So here is a pen input control. I have a save button. Let's say the use case is that the save button should be disabled until the user has signed this form or whatever this is. So right now it's disabled. I'm going to sign something. It becomes enabled. I'm going to clear it and it becomes disabled again. If you use the isBlank function on a pen input control, it will not give you the desired result. So instead, you need to do a couple of things. On the on visible of the screen, I'm first resetting the pen input control. That's optional. You don't have to do that. You then do pen input dot image, store it in a variable called initial pen input. You can call it whatever you want. Then I store it in another variable called pen input. So there is one that's initial pen input. There is one that's pen input. Both of them have the same values to begin with. Then in the pen input control, I go to its on select and I capture the pen input dot image again in the second variable. Now the initial variable still has the initial image value. So now I can go here to its display mode property and simply say, if the pen input is not the same as initial pen input and the pen input is equal to the current controls image, keep it editable. If not, disable it. And if I don't even get to this condition where initial pen input is not the same as pen input, keep it in the disabled state. So a little bit of a complicated expression, but using this, you can actually check if a pen input control is blank or not. Moving on to next, Q. Q is always one of the toughest alphabets to come up with. However, I recently created a game called Cows and Bulls. There is a link on my blog to that game. It's basically like Wordle. Wordle is actually inspired from Cows and Bulls. and this game has been there since the 19th century, if I'm not mistaken. It's basically a game of numbers instead of alphabets. So for this one, I needed a keyboard inside the app. And the reason for that is I needed certain restrictions on the keyboard. Like, for example, every digit is supposed to be unique. So if I add a digit, I should not allow the users to select that digit again. I cannot control the device's keyboard by adding my own restrictions. However, if I have my own keyboard inside an app, I can put in whatever restrictions I want. That's what prompted me to create a QWERTY keyboard, and it works great. Several advantages. One of them, other than adding restrictions, is that you can position it in the app wherever you want to. And what I mean by that is when you open your device's keyboard, in some devices, the app moves upwards for your keyboard to be present at the bottom. That may not be a good user experience, again, based on what your layout of the screen is. This way, you can position your keyboard wherever you want to without affecting or moving the app. So this keyboard, which I think looks pretty cool, is a QWERTY keyboard, which does pretty much everything that your device's keyboard can do. Like, for example, I can go uppercase, I can hit backspace, I can write my name, add a space, and you can even add special characters. I have not, just because this is an example keyboard. You can type in numbers as well, and you can add restrictions like, for example, don't allow spaces. If that's a restriction you want to add, you can just disable or hide the space key on this on-screen keyboard. Next is our, this one also comes from one of the apps that I created for fun. Few weeks, maybe months ago, I created a teleprompter using a Canvas app. That is also on my blog if you want to check it out. I needed to translate the text entered by a user into an HTML control. The reason for that is I wanted to support creating a mirror image of the text. So teleprompters typically allow users to create mirror images of their text, and I wanted to include that feature as well. So my biggest struggle was, how do I get the HTML version of the text that a user enters in the HTML control? You can easily do that. Here is the HTML. Here is a label, and here is a rich text editor. So instead of giving this rich text editor to the user so they can format their text, because when they are using a teleprompter, they might want certain text in bold, certain text in a different format, whatever they want to do. I wanted to give them the ability. That's why I did not give them a text input control, gave them the rich text editor. The challenge was to convert the text entered by users into its HTML version, so I could use the HTML tag to create a mirror image of the text. It is actually pretty simple. All you need to do is, like on this label, what I've done is rich text editor dot HTML text. This is all you need to convert the text from a rich text editor into its HTML control. So if you ever want to do that, and here is a basic example, just add a label or a button or whichever way you want to access the HTML version of text in from a rich text editor, just to rich text editor dot HTML text. Next is size breakpoints. There is an app property that is hidden somewhere that a lot of makers don't know about. It's called size breakpoints. If in the tree view, if you go to app and open the properties dropdowns, it's right here at the bottom called size breakpoints. These are the default values, 600, 900, 1200. You can change these. What this does is it basically creates 4 different size profiles for your app. In case you want to change the layout of the screen based on the width of the screen. So if this app is supposed to be used on mobile, tablet, and desktop, you can configure this, and this creates 4 different profiles. Screen width less than 600, screen width between 600 and 900, and screen width between 9 and 1200, and screen width greater than 1200. The way I'm using it here is I'm changing the wrap count of this gallery based on the screen size. As you can see, this is 1919, which is more than 1200. So the screen size is 4. If I resize my window, as soon as it goes bit less than 1200, it changes to 3. And if it goes below 900, it changes to 2, and the wrap count changes. And if I reduce it further, the screen size changes to 1, and now my gallery is perfectly available in the layout that I want for mobile devices. So if I go to the wrap count property, just to show you how this was done, it's a simple switch statement based on the screen size, which can be 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to keep the wrap count the same as the screen size, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. And the advantage of doing that, I could have just used screen.width, but let's say I, at some point of time later, I wanted to change those breakpoints. I would have had to go to every single control where I was using these breakpoints and make the updates. Instead of that, I can now just go to app, go to the size breakpoints property, and change the values here. Moving on to the next one, T is for the teleprompter app that I was talking about. Biggest challenge for me was to scroll the text vertically. After thinking about it for a few minutes or maybe a few hours, I figured that the easiest way to do that is to change the Y position of a label or any other control that I was using from the bottom of the screen to the top. And for that, I'm using a timer control. So I start off the Y position at the bottom of the screen, multiply that with timer.value divided by timer.duration, because that is a ratio that changes from 0 to 1. And by controlling the duration of the timer, I can control the speed of the scroll as well. So I'm going to hit preview here, hit next. As you can see, the text scrolls from bottom of the screen to the top. And if I go to the Y property of this label here, just to show you what I'm doing, which is this guy, go to its Y position. Pretty simple, parent.height, which is the starting point, minus timer.value divided by timer.duration, which is a ratio that changes from 0 to 1, multiply it by parent.height into 2. So this is a cool little trick that you can use to scroll text on your screen from bottom to top. And similarly, you can actually do a horizontal scroll, which I'm going to cover in X tip. So moving on to the next one, which is upload. Attachment control. We've all seen that inside a form. You cannot add an attachment control using the plus icon. However, you can actually extract the attachment control from within a form control. And the reason is there are multiple use cases to use for the attachment control. One example is to display the list of attachments for all accounts in a gallery. So like here, there is one account that has a particular attachment. And this is, again, a nested gallery. The items property of this nested gallery, or it's actually not a nested gallery. It's a gallery with the attachment control. The advantage of using an attachment control is I don't have to use a nested gallery. Now I can simply set its items property to this item dot attachments. And the gallery is set to display all the accounts. So this item dot attachments is all attachments for the particular account. And that way I can now create a gallery of all attachments for all accounts. And this was possible only by extracting the attachment control outside from a form, because if you go to this insert tab, you will not see the attachment control here. Next is auto numbering. Let's see. Version auto numbering. One challenge with Canvas apps is that sometimes users don't have the latest version. And yes, you can add a label and ask makers to update that version number on that label every single time they go in the studio. However, all of us will forget to do that at some point of time. To automate that, you can create a table in which you can store the version number. This can be any data source, SharePoint, Dataverse, Excel, doesn't matter. In the on visible of the welcome screen or in the app on start, you can do this where you can actually check if the app is being opened inside the studio. If the parameter tenant ID is blank and if acceleration signal and location signal are not returning values, that means you are inside the studio. If that is the case, update the record in one of the tables, which I have created a table called app versions inside Dataverse. Name can remain the same. There will always be only one single record. If there is no record, that's the first time you are saving the app or opening the app inside the studio, it will create a new record. Otherwise, it will update that one record. And I'm just simply going to take the app version and add one to it. And this way, I can also use the modified on column and use that to display more information about the current version. So now, if I go to my version tip screen, which should be the one on this one, it updates the timestamp and the version number as well. So if I close this app and I open it again, this will become version 33. The timestamp will get updated to whenever I open the app again. So this way you can just add this label at the bottom of a screen or in the bottom right corner with a very small text if you don't want to make it too prominent. And it'll be easy when a user submits or shows that they are facing an error in a screenshot, you can actually just easily compare and verify if they are on the latest version or not. Next is W with function. This is actually one of the topics that I covered way back when, not with the with function though. There are certain delegation issues that don't get flagged in the app checker. One example is with function. So here is a quick example. There is a delegation warning because I'm doing this filter courses where instructor.name is equal to lookup, where name is my daughter's name, Misha Bhatia. Because there is a lookup inside filter, it complains about delegation. And if I go here and change my delegation limit from 2000 to 1, I'm going to come back to this gallery and it will display only one account. And here, if I come to this particular function on the right hand side, my approach was, or my instinct was to do this lookup outside the filter and then just say filter courses where instructor.name is equal to my local with function variable. As you can see, there is no delegation warning, but as soon as I update the app, it actually returns only one account, which is why this function is also not delegable. It's more harmful because it doesn't even get flagged by the app checker. So don't get fooled. If the app checker doesn't tell you that there are delegation issues, always change the delegation setting to something like 1 and test out your app to be 100% sure that your app is free from delegation issues. X is similar to the Y position scrolling that we saw. You can actually change the X position as well, exactly the same way. The use case could be maybe there is a banner or a promotion you want to show in your app. Vertical scrolling probably won't make much sense for that. You would want to scroll something from left of the side of the screen to the right. And you can achieve that behavior by changing the X position, starting from 0 or like if the width of the label is 100, starting from -100, multiplying it with the timer dot value divided by timer dot duration. And that way the X position will change automatically from like a -100 to the screen width. Next is Y, yes, no, especially in Dataverse, where you have a yes, no column. There are a couple of ways you can filter. This one here, I'm saying filter the list of students where the international column is equal to yes. I can write yes in double quotes as text, and then I can convert the international column value using the text function. It is logically correct, but it's not delegable. As you can see, it gets flagged as well. On the right hand side, though, this is how you would want to use a choice in Dataverse, where filter students, just the column name, do not update or try to convert it into a different format. Use the option set name here, which is international bracket students, which tells me that it's a local option set for the students table dot yes. This way you will not get delegation issues and you will be able to achieve the same filtering. This actually happened on a project. One of the makers had this function, and it is very common, especially for beginners, to ignore delegation warnings, because if you go to your app checker, as long as you don't see errors in your app checker, you don't get concerned about it. You may not even go to the warning section. So, but delegation issues are pretty important. My second ever app had delegation, did not have delegation warnings, but still had delegation issues. And I did not catch that. The customer reported after a few months. And that's when I figured out that if you use table shaping functions like add columns, they are actually the output of table shaping functions is not delegable, even though there is no app checker warning. So definitely change your app setting from delegation limit from 2000 to 1 and test out your entire app. Last one is Z. Um, this step is about making your apps zippy or more performant. To make sure that your app is as performant as it can be, I strongly recommend using the monitor tool. So we will take the example of for all and patch that we had used earlier. On the left hand side, if you go under tools, there is a monitor tool. You can even run this on a published app. You can invite other users to the session so you can exactly see what the users are clicking through. I'm going to click on this for all and patch, and I'm going to go to the monitor tool to see what's happening. Multiple get rows. In fact, the monitor tool is kind of getting stuck right now. Multiple patch rows as well, which is one for each account. As you can see, there is a patch row, there is another patch row, there will be more. And just that one click resulted in 728, where it's increasing even right now. These many calls to the data source, to an external data source, which is why that button remains disabled for a pretty long time. I think it has stopped right now, 883 calls. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this batch updates, which was patch table, comma, collection. I'm actually going to clear this out so we can easily compare. If I do this, you go here and there are 115 calls. So from 830 odd, I brought it down to 115 using that patch tip. The way I was able to figure that out is by using the monitor tool. It not only tells you where the user has clicked. So for example, I clicked on this button. The name of this button is button2_12. This tells me that I hit on select. If I click on it, it also tells me the formula that got used. For all is the for all function on the on select. If you don't see information here, you can go to app settings. I believe it is under here, debug published app. If you turn this on, every single record in this monitor tool will tell you exactly which function was used on which control. So to wrap it up, use the monitor tool. It's actually pretty useful. You can even use it on model-driven apps to figure out what particular buttons were clicked by a user, what particular functions were called, were there excessive data calls, if so, why, and that can point you in the right direction to make your apps more performant. So that was the last tip. Like I said, this is my social media profiles here again. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and you can subscribe to my blog as well. And you can always reach out to me via email, LinkedIn, Twitter if you have Power Apps questions. That's it, Raz.
Wow, fantastic, Hardit. I think everyone is really, really blown away. So much tip shared within 1 hour. It's really going to add a lot of value to everyone's projects here. Just taking a look at the questions. We've got a couple of minutes just to handle a few questions here.
Sure.
So Eduardo is asking, I didn't get the other section, using with and the filtering will solve the delegation problem. I think Eduardo's looking for a bit of clarification here. He probably doesn't understand how using with and filtering would solve delegation. That's what I think Eduardo's asking there.
Okay, so yes, so with function doesn't throw a delegation warning, leads to an error. The way I would solve that is I would first do this lookup and store the value in a variable, whether it's on the on visible of the screen, maybe you navigated the screen, maybe you will most likely not hard code the name. So maybe there was a drop down of instructors. So on the on change of that drop down, you can set the name in a variable, and you can just come here and your expression will simply be filter courses where instructor.name is equal to var instructor name, just that this variable will be set outside of this particular item's property.
Excellent. And there's a question here. Again, it's probably some clarification regarding the custom page and offline capabilities in model-driven apps. I think there may be some. So Jake is asking, will custom page honor offline capabilities of model-driven apps?
Yes, the short answer is yes. If you go to Microsoft documentation about custom pages, it lists that as a limitation. But if I remember correctly, it also states that it will be coming out in the near future. So offline capabilities in Canvas apps will still be a pain. Offline capabilities in custom pages or Canvas pages will become a breeze.
Fantastic. Excellent, Hardit. Look, so we've got no more time. I would like you, if possible, could you share your contact details, such as your blog and YouTube, in the chat? I know it's hard, it's not very difficult to forget the Power Addict. But if you could share that in the chat, then I think a lot of people would like to stay in touch with you.
Will do for sure. And I'm going to blog about all these tips, just like I did last time in 2020. So I will include working examples as well. You can definitely watch the recording, but if you need written documentation of all these tips, you will find that on my blog pretty soon.
Well, there you have it. Hardit, the Power Addict, Bhatia, thank you once again for joining us all the way from the USA. And whilst we're in the USA, that's a great segue on to our next speaker. Our next featured speaker for today is Patrick.